Okay, the complex was designed by William Waddell, the same person who designed Pentridge. One to keep you in, one to keep you out. Started building in 1875, sorry, and 1878 it was open for business. Cost £5,000 to buy the land and £64,500 to build. And just for those who want a bit of useless information, there's about 125,000 cubic metres of soil in the mounds. Just something different for you. It's had a lot of owners from over the years. Victorian Trade and Customs were the one who built it. Originally there was a magazine in Royal Park, and of course it got built up too much. So they moved it to Footscray, and if you know where to look in Cowper Street, part of the back wall is still there. Then they built this one, and this is the biggest one that was ever built. And then around about 1912, 1915, it started to get built up as well. And also, by that time they were talking ammunition factory, and we'll go into a bit of that detail of the history of all that part of it later on. So it was getting built up here. So anyone from Altona? No? Anyone remember the explosive wharf in Altona, opposite Coringal? Well, that was built, and the Truganini, or Truganina, however you want to pronounce it, explosive reserve was created. And this then ceased to become a magazine for import. It was only used for magazine for the actual manufacture of the ammunition. Okay? My name's Andy Calvert. Just a bit of history, my history, so that you know I'm not trying to pull your leg. When the ammunition factory was up there, I did my apprenticeship in it as a fitter and turner in 1970. 2,700 people working in the factory. At the same time, there was about 800 in the ordnance factory and about 400 in the explosives factory on Cordite Avenue. I stayed here for a number of years and then went to Albion Explosives Factory, which is now Canley, and stayed there until it was closed down. We removed the equipment that went to Mulwala, and we took it to Mulwala, set it up and made it work. Then I was a bit greedy and took the retrenchment package and made hay while the sun shined and what have you. And then a few months later they rang up and said, do you want to come and work for the relocation of the ammunition factory, the ordnance factory and St Mary's in Sydney? I don't know if anyone's aware, but 1,400 hectares being developed at this moment, same as these are, only obviously much bigger, a lot more controversial than here because of different wildlife corridors and what have you, but same sort of thing. And I worked with them, moved it all to Benalla, we set it up, made it all work. Only the explosive side I was involved in. We set it up, made it all work. And then we had a bit of a falling out of some of the, how we put it, the new management's procedures, and we don't work for them anymore. Whether it's good or bad, I don't know for anybody. But that's just my history so that you know that what I'm talking about is reasonably close to facts. Had a little bit of experience, had a few close calls, but we're all here. All my fingers, everything else. Okay, the building itself, the original buildings were all bluestone, as you can see from the walls and what have you. The loading shed was built here. The canal used to connect to the river, obviously. The bigger ships would park in the bay, or anchor in the bay, if I'm correct. The barge would come up, be brought up to here, and outside you can go and look through there. The doors don't open, but you can go in there if you want to have a look and look down along the canal. They were lifted up, block and tackle, onto a trolley, and trolleys were pushed in to all the various different buildings. The road you came up on also had a tramway, and for the smaller ships could come up the river in those days. And over there, roughly where those sight sheds are, there was a set of stables, and the horses used to pull them from the river up until they got to the end of this shed. And anyone know why they didn't use the horses inside?
The shoes, sparks.
That's one, but the most important one is if the horse bolts, you've got a trolley full of drums of powder. When they start falling out, there's a 99% chance they're going to go bang, and sympathetic detonation. Just because you have a detonation here, it can set off other. So if you push it by hand, most people are like me, pretty lazy, So they let go of the trolley and bolt rather than take the trolley with them. Just a little bit of useless information again. In later years, about 1908 or 9, they built a brick extension. You can't see it till you get inside. The brick extension there that was for fuses, and then the brick buildings were built 1918 to 1920 for cordite, when we went from black powder in all our ammunition to cordite. Now, cordite is basically nitroglycerin, nitrocellulose, and there's a whole lot of additives, same as black powder is a generic name. You vary the grain size, the composition of actually making it, all changes things. So it's a black powder, gunpowder are the same, it's just a very generic name. There's a whole lot of different varieties, same as cordite. The version now, it's not cordite anymore, it's propellants, because they've changed from a lot of nitroglycerin, nitrocellulose to different other compositions as well. And the propellant, all it does, all the black powder, you have a cartridge case and a bullet in the end of it, and whatever pushes that bullet out and sends it up to the person up there you want to kill, that's called propellant. The bigger ones have high explosives in the end, and when they hit the ground at the end or hit the building or whatever, they blow up and hopefully damage a lot of things and kill off a lot of things. That's the theory of it all. Okay, we'll go inside. Get you to sign the visitor's book, please, just to say just to acknowledge that you've got all the safety things and what have you, and you're aware of what's going on and you trust me implicitly. That's about it.
Where did the black powder actually come from?
Most of it from England, some from Germany, and some from Launceston in Tasmania. Two areas within the building. Now, ladies, don't get upset when I talk about this side of the door is what you call a clean area, and the other side of the door is a dirty area. But we're not talking about cleanliness as in we can eat off the floor. It's a different way of doing things. We have specific procedures, how to handle things, how to do things, cleaning up and all that. So to differentiate, they were called clean areas and dirty areas. Just another. When you came to work here, you went in here, stripped all your clothes off, walked around the other side. Unfortunately, it wasn't unisex in those days, so bad luck. Round to the other side and you put on woolen pants, jackets, all done either with wooden toggles or tied with string. Leather boots, stitched only. In later years they went to galosha type things with conductive rubber. So that, again, you don't have sparks and all those issues. Your trolleys had brass wheels to help eliminate the sparks and any static electricity. This side was the foreman's office, and he used to log in all the barrels and log out. The supermarkets in recent years have been flogging first in, first out. This was done from here, from the beginning. So your first barrel of powder came in, was the first one that went out. Okay? Any questions? No questions? Okay. Between the end of the First World War and 93, when he retired, the senior foreman, chargeman, storeholder, whatever you like to call him, was named Wally Jack. Start to become clearer? Yes. And they reckon he ruled it with an iron fist as if it was his own magazine. So everyone started saying, this looks like Jack's magazine, or this is Jack's magazine, and that's how it got its name, Jack's magazine. Okay? Happy now?
Yes, thank you.
All right, so you've finished, you can go now. All right, from now we'll go around through the tunnel into the main magazine. So remember, through the tunnel, when you're going through, keep between the rail lines, please. Go through and wait about halfway down the building because they'll have to start the generator, and our friendly neighbourhood bees are there. I don't think there'll be any issue, but just to make certain. One other thing, not many locals, but there used to be a big story going around. There was a lot of tunnels as part of the defence arrangement in the western suburbs. Well, you're going to be going through one of two. There's one, there's the other. If you want to take photos, Wait till we come round the right around and take them from that one. This one's got some fencing in front of it. It just detracts from the view a little bit, that's all. Okay. If you have a look at the magazine itself, very thick bluestone walls, buttresses regularly spaced along, mounted around the outside. Anyone know why? That's right. The explosion then is directed upwards and then in theory drops straight back down. If you don't have anything like around it, projectiles from here, whether it be a piece of wood, piece of steel, fires across, goes into the next magazine, and you just continues around. Don't take this the wrong way. The Americans had a bit of trouble in about, I think, 1921. They, whether didn't have enough money or got cocky or whatever, again, sorry, they decided not to mount a lot of their magazines, and for 2 weeks it just kept going from one to another and one, because no one wanted to go and put the hose on it to put it out, obviously. There wasn't many volunteers for that. If you look, the places here and here, and they're quite a way along, they've got slots in there for the ventilation, and they don't go straight through, they go in and around like that. So inside there's 2 entrances, or if you like, so that the air can circulate without any problems. You've also got to remember that 1878 electric power was a bit thin on the ground, so everything that was done inside here was done with only these windows, one either side. You saw the shutters as we came past the end, and there's another set of shutters at the other end, and the door was obviously open. That was all you had for light. So when you go in, just think about that. You're handling barrels, which is more than likely to go off. Okay, stick with the rails, and away you go. All right, we all with us? Yes. Okay. In a magazine is storage only. So the 2 big buildings, storage only. No work is done on the barrels of powder, they're only stored in there. Now if you lived in Maidstone and wanted to put a sewer in, obviously you're not going to sit there with a hammer and chisel and break up all the rocks. So you'd come here and you'd buy maybe 10 pounds, 5 kilos of black powder. So what happened? They'd take a barrel out of the main magazine in a trolley, bring it all the way around here, because take it in here, and this is what they call the chemist store. He'd then decant whatever amount you needed and then would test it, because black powder is very hygroscopic, so it becomes a problem with any moisture. It's a green explosive, if you like. Throw it on the ground, it turns into fertiliser, which is good. Not like, say, TNT, you bury it in the ground 20 years, come back and it's good as the day you put it in, which is why there's so many problems with around the world and whatever with different things. So this is what that was for. There's an identical one to this further on, and that was the Cooper. So any barrels that got damaged in transit, whether on the ship coming over or with here, or any problems they found when they were decanting, the barrel was emptied into another one, and the barrel was taken down there, cleaned, and then the Cooper would fix it up so that it was good again. If you want to have a look inside, it's just a building. The only thing spectacular about it is the varnished Baltic pine ceiling. Any questions to start with?
We were just discussing those photos over there, the women in the factories.
Do you want any bit of useless information about that?
Yeah. And we were saying because it was the Second World War, I think, 2 of those photos, the men were all at war and the women worked in the factories.
In 1939, there was approximately 1,000 women working in all the defence industries in Australia. By, wait till I check, make sure I get the dates right. I've got it written down, but there was 71,000, I think, in 43, or that's how much it changed so much. And something that most people don't know, 71,200 in the defence industries by 41. Something that's not very common knowledge in this country is around the mid-43 to the end of 43, Australia ramped down their defence production, like ammunition, explosives and things like that, because we were making more than we could use and more than the Americans that were in Australia could use. What was happening was we're running out of food. So they were taken out of the munitions and defence to produce more food. It's just a little bit of more useless information that not many people realise and don't understand or don't know. If you looked here, you'll see there's a timeline of when all the different parts were built. We're obviously in this building. We went into that one, and that's the small one. And like I said, when you go around the outside, it's just exercise. There's nothing great to see. I never open the brick buildings because it's just a rectangular brick building and it's not very spectacular. That's similar to the way they would have been stored in here. Similar sort of barrels. And on the other side, we have the Hollywood barrels with the screws in it, which is not a good thing. Again, shape look familiar. Take away the mound. That's in Canada. So we're talking explosives, magazines and things like that. Much the same all over the world. Always has been. The only change is in recent years, because they're cheaper, is what they call the igloo type. They bend metal over like that, put concrete on the top, a big pile of dirt. Again, the same thing, and there's a seam in the top so that they open up like that if there's an explosion.
Maybe that's where the arch construction of these magazines come from. The
Could have been.
Square room.
Could have been. That's a picture of a type of gunpowder, black powder, whatever you like. It's all varies. You get different shapes, different sizes, different grain sizes. Depends what you want to happen. You vary it. Gunpowder is still used now for what they call the time fuses. So when you pull the pin on your grenade, you've got approximately 4 seconds to throw it, and that's because of the black powder burning. And by, again, picking your composition and how much you compress it, you can control the length of time. So if they throw a grenade at you, you just throw it back. A little bit of a spiel here from 1988 centenary year, or bicentenary year, but it was also the centenary year of the factory. In 1888, I'll go back a bit. Victoria was always big in defence and what have you, even before Federation. We had the biggest army, the biggest navy, the biggest everything. No Air Force, of course, but everything else was bigger than everyone else's. So they decided rather than import everything, they wanted to make their own. And about 1884 or 5, they started looking for people to come and make. And an army captain from New Zealand came. And if you look down there where we were standing at the car park, down the other end, Merv Hughes Oval, well, between there was what they built ended up the Commonwealth Ammunition Corporation. And they were a private enterprise, and they supplied all the military hardware up to, well, all the 303 ammunition, which is all they used, right up until 1920. After the war, they went broke. So the government leased it till 1927, and then they bought it. And then they expanded the factory and mostly moved it up above the floodplain. In the 70s, the old factory buildings were leased by Myers and Lindsay Fox for storage. You remember that?
Yes.
I thought you might.
They made furniture there. ICI.
I believe this. There was a person through here last Saturday, and he did his apprenticeship as a cabinet maker down there. This is just a bit of a tale of the factory and what have you. Different bits and pieces about it and what have you. Picture it. Some of them I started work with, some of them I knew. The coin or medallion, I suppose, design, can't remember by, it's in here, but it was made by the Perth Mint. Supposedly 12% silver. So just keep your beady eyes off, all right? If you look, that's just some layouts. The factory itself up the top of the hill, that's the old Commonwealth ammunition factory down the bottom, and that's of course Jack's Magazine where we are. These give you a bit of an idea of what was happening. These were produced after the war, but the number of factories there were around, and there was quite a lot of them, very wide variety of the products they made. In 1989, the government decided they need to rationalise everything. Now, they've already closed the Albion Explosives Factory, and it was done without a whimper. Us poor people at Albion, we jumped up and down and frothed at the mouth, but 300 people in the big picture and Labor electorate, so no one cared. When these started to be closed, or talked about being closed, there was a big hue and cry. So rather than the government close it, they formed a Commonwealth corporation called Australian Defence Industries, ADI. Anyone went past probably saw the signs out the front. ADI. That was 100% government owned, and they actually did the closing of these 3 factories. As part of the process, they had to decontaminate everything, and all the site was decontaminated. You can eat off the dirt anywhere you want, whatever. I'd be quite happy to, because I was involved in some of that, both here and at Albion and St Mary's. That was all cut and dried. They cleaned up the site. Then the government's gone, they're going to sell off all that land. That's too much money for them. So they took the land back, left them with everything else, but took the land back. Then they go, what are we going to do with it? So ADI had already formed a joint venture with Lend-Lease. Lend-Lease supplied the capital. ADI was to supply the land. So that was all in limbo. And the government then formed another corporation called Comland. So Comland and Lend-Lease started the development. They completed the development at Waterford Green, the old ordnance factory, and about halfway through here, 2007 or 8, Lend-Lease actually bought Comland from the government. In the meantime, Benalla factory started, and that's where they manufacture anything that's manufactured in this country, or what little bit's manufactured in this country now. They, as a part of ADI, you go to Mulwala Explosives Factory, it's owned by the Commonwealth Government, but operated by Australian Defence Industries. In 2006, Thales, which is a French-English corporation, they bought it out. And you probably noticed down here on the metrology lab, it's got Thales out the front. They now operate Benalla and own it, and they also operate Mulwala Explosives Factory. If you look, where will I find, I don't know where it is. There's a whole lot of changes been made. In here, in the ammunition factory, when I first started here, there was probably a capability, didn't manufacture, but a capability to manufacture probably 40, 45 different types of ammunition. In Benalla, they can make 5.5s, 7.62s, 50 cal, 20 mil, 105s and 5-inch 54 for the Navy. That's the only capability we have in this country now. The only capability of high explosives or propellant is Mulwala. 60 tonnes a week TNT, 40 tonnes a week RDX, and about 25 tonnes of propellant. And when you look in the big picture of the rest of the world, we're about 951st in line with the capability. So don't pick a fight with Tasmania, because we're sure to lose. It's unfortunate, but that's the way it is. In the old days, again, we're talking back before ADI, this is a layout of how it all went together. Each factory, what it made, where it went from there on. So everyone did everything, and it all came to different factories to be filled or assembled and what have you. So it's like every little bits and pieces were made everywhere, like the car industry now. Instead of making it all yourself, everybody makes a little bit, and it all comes together. Part of the reason was from way back before the Second World War, so that people didn't know what was going on, was part of the issue. So you only knew your little piece of the big picture. That's the Ordnance Factory, which is Waterford Green now. I don't know how many partied at the back drive-in there that was on. Yeah. You did, right. Yes. I knew you were a bit dodgy. Yeah. And there's a model of it. If you want to see a model of this factory, an Albion Explosives Factory, the Museum of the West has got those 2 models over there. There's a few pictures here, again, different things They're fairly self-explanatory. They've got bits and pieces there. An aerial photo, 1940, this one. So how many can remember what was going on then? I never said a word.
I was 8 or 9 years old and I wasn't here.
So we're obviously here. Gordon Street, Owen Street. Farnsworth Avenue doesn't come here. That was the old road that went right up under the, well, what's now the Vic Uni. That's Merv Hughes Oval now.
That's that one on the corner, isn't it? Long
Yeah.
poles. 'Cause that used to go straight down, didn't it?
Yes, yeah. That used to come down around and there was an old wooden bridge. So this is where your entrance now. Cumberland Drive runs roughly like that and Edgewater Boulevard runs roughly up there. And the harbour and the lake was all here. Anyone know why the lake was built? That's what's the popular misconception. But they wanted to fill to raise up all this area so they could build houses on it. How can it be flood mitigation? Hey, how can it be flood mitigation if the lake's always full? I might be just cynical and hard to get on with, I don't know. This is 1970, the year I started. You can see here, we talked about before, people talked about the machine, them hearing the guns firing. That's where they were firing. There's a 2.5 metre pipe all the way along so that there's no influence from outside air, so they can check the accuracy and the velocity, both of which are reasonably critical in the small arms. And small arms is anything under about 25 mil or 1 inch for the old timers.
I remember hearing them.
You did, you could hear them for everywhere.
Let's go up.
And you were probably involved in the trotting track and all the dodgy things in 1970.
No, I heard the stories, but I still remember the track being there.
That's the Essendon Golf Club now. Essendon Golf Club.
Yep.
And Hume's Pipes. Look familiar? So which was your building?
I used to go and visit there, and there was the upper factory and the lower factory.
That's only the pipe yard, is all we made. We only got the pipe yard in the picture.
Where the frozen meat was made.
Yeah, that little bit further along. I don't think it was frozen meat though. It was canned meat, so it'd only be steam cooked.
Yeah, but they also had some, exported some frozen, according to Peter Somerville, what he remembers, what he knows.
Could have. I didn't think they did.
We were leading in the world for exporting frozen.
1870s they started freezing out of Geelong and carting it overseas. This is 1994, beginning of 94. Commonwealth all gone.
Yes.
Most of the others are gone, but the rest of the factory is still there. They've just started to, and they work down through it. Part of it's the cap factory here is gone, but it's still bits and pieces there. If you're interested in how the streets got their name, here's a little bit of spiel on that. This is 2001, and if you look closely here, it's the beginning, changed a bit. If you look here, there's a lot of slots in the ground. That material was taken out and put in a big pile here, and underneath it there was 4 steel plates put. And they stacked it up to see how much it was going to settle, whether it was feasible to actually build up to put the houses on. And it settled, I think, from memory, 80 mil over the time, with 4 metres of fill on top of it. Here we've only got 2.5. And from what I remember, the most settlement there's ever been here was about 40 mil. And the top's all obviously gone and what have you refilled. Merv Hughes Oval, that's very early days. Flemington Racecourse before the new grandstand. And of course, that's what we've got now, the lake and all the streets and what have you. And we are here, just for a bit more useless information.
And we got a new bridge across the river. It's old now.
Gonna say, there it is.
Yeah. That's all right.
Still open a canal then too. Okay, over here we have a range of different ammunition. Well, these are only the cases. The only one that's made now is this 105 howitzer, That's the... When you use a 105 howitzer, if you don't like someone saying Paran, like Jason lives over there, I think, so we get rid of him. When this is assembled, you have 7 different bags of propellant in there. 2 types of propellant and 7 different volumes. A cartridge, and that's a 105 projectile, the part that actually fires out. So to get to Paran, you look up your tables and it goes bag 1, bag 3, bag 7. So the rest you take out and throw on the little fire you've got, because it just burns. Otherwise you'll end up, if you're firing at the rate they can, about 1 every minute and a half, you're going to end up with a big pile of propellant. And if someone shoots into that and it catches fire, it's only going to be a big fire, but it's very intense, very quick and very intense. So you need to burn it up as you go. Then you look at your tables again and it says 7.5 degrees. And you go, bang, goodbye Jason, sorry. And that's how artillery is reasonably accurate, and that was because of that reason. They can vary the amount of power they use to drive the projectile out and the angle. Most of these are old, 40mm Bofors. Remember them? No.
Not that old.
Doesn't matter. 76mm, which is old and redundant again. And these are engine starters. They actually only have propellant in, and they fire, and they put a charge of gas through and set the turbines going. So it's air start, if you like. There's a few what's-the-names here of all the bits and pieces that go into actually manufacturing some of these things. And if you're into black powder, I can sell you a copy of the procedure how to make it and the volumes. So just...
No thanks.
Why not? There was a fella here yesterday, they used to make it as kids, black powder. It was quite common in early days. This is some of the range of things that were made, just pictures of them and what have you. The 105, we're only making the howitzer. Phalanx, which is the ones they shoot the missiles down, and we're probably better than the rest of the world. The rest of the world uses depleted uranium for the projectiles. We use tungsten. Costs a bit more, but we're not going to kill you with radiation. And you don't shoot a missile down, you actually put literally a wall of projectiles up. They fire around about between 6,000 and 8,000 rounds a second, so you've more or less got a solid stream of metal going. And your missile fires through it and it just chops it up. Same as when you're firing anti-aircraft. They don't fire at the aircraft because you've got not much hope of hitting it, so they fire in the general direction and they have a timer fuse on it. So they know, aeroplane 10,000 metres, we want 8 seconds, you wind it to 8 seconds, throw it in the gun, boom. It goes up, when it gets 8 seconds runs out, it fires and the projectile shatters literally into tiny little pieces. And the way it's designed, it doesn't just break straight through, it breaks on an angle, so that you're left with a lot of sharp edges and it really chops everything to pieces. If you get a piece of 105 shrapnel, you can actually carve the wood like that, just like a knife.
To dodge that stuff.
You did? I thought you weren't that old.
On the other side of the world, I was the enemy.
We're all the enemy at some stage. Just some local people, see if you can figure out where that is. I'll help you. It's got right tram tracks in it. It's not in here, no, it's a main road.
Little private question. What's the flag?
Australian Army Quality Assurance, Army Quality Assurance Service. They never trusted the factory quality system, so
Interested in the colouring.
they used to do their own checking, same as the Navy. So you had the manufacturer was checking, and so was the customer.
So that's the seal of approval.
Pretty much, yeah. Along through here is a bit of a spiel about a lot of all the old factories and what have you, all the different ones. And there's a couple, that's a few other odds and sods. That's the Truganini Explosive Reserve in Altona, Black Powder Mill in Deer Park, Canley. I don't know if you ever was open last Saturday actually. That's about Point Cook.
Was it close to the ICI, Deer Park?
No. Station Road, Dumfries Street, across the road from there roughly. There's a few of the rules and different rule books and what have you and different rules. And we start on the actual factories, Albion Explosives Factory, Maribyrnong Explosives Factory, and we used to make our own uniforms just across the road from Pentridge. But that all went with the rationalisation, munitions. Oh, Gaffney Street. Yeah. You remember a lot of things, it's worrying now. Munitions filling factory
All my life.
in St Mary's, Ordnance Factory at Maribyrnong, and most people don't know, down near Station Pier there used to be an engine works, and we in this country used to make ship engines, 5 and 7 cylinder ship engines, up to about 1200 horsepower per cylinder. We've made many of them here. Ammunition factory, and that's what I was saying about all the different things they make now. Then, it's only 105 is the only one that's effectively made here, because 5-inch 54 came in after all these, which is what's on the naval boats these days. My Whaler Explosives Factory and Lithgow, Blue Mountains, they make all Australian guns, machine guns and things like that. Have done since 1912. Back in 2004, a couple of local schools got interested in what was happening around here, and they produced both of these. Just a bit about the Maribyrnong Valley and what have you, and they put all the birds' boxes and everything around here. Over here we have a few medical items. No, that's a torture chair. Back in the early days, there wasn't many doctors and what have you, so the ammunition factory, the ordnance factory and the explosive factory in Maribyrnong had their own doctors. They also had a dentist and an x-ray. Try the apron. Try the apron. The blue apron. Go and pick it up. It's lead because it's the x-ray apron. So they all had to keep it. The dentist went in the early 60s. The x-ray was still there till the mid-90s. And the doctor ended up with only one doctor for the 3 factories. Or actually did all the factories in those days. These trolleys here, and they're not beer steins either, just in case you thought.
Coffee canisters?
Yeah, they'd probably be all right. You won't have any problem with static electricity. When you're dealing with any sort of explosives, when you're actually putting it into anything, whether it be into a hand grenade, into a case for a projectile, whether you're filling a bomb, you use the minimum quantities you can. So when these were set up, it all came here in 40 kilogram steel pails. It would have come into this building and be stored, then they'd take it up to a smaller magazine up on the top of the hill, and then they'd break it down and start filling these. And then this was taken, as you go from the bigger size, you actually opened a steel shutter and passed your next smaller one into there, closed that, went around the other side, swapped it into the smaller one, opened a shutter, put it into, and eventually you ended up in these, which were then wheeled to the machine, and they were tipped in as it's, and then you assembled it all and away you went. And that's about it.
That would have been tipped in very gently at a specific point. Yeah?
Whatever you see on the television, you want to believe about, oops, better not say anything. Most things, the ones that are real problem are the initiators. If you look on the assembly there, you put the primer in the firing pin, and whatever happens, there's a firing pin. Sometimes it's electrical charge that does the firing, sometimes it's a mechanical action. That sets off a small flash, and that starts the propellant burning, and on it goes as a process. They are sensitive. You put it on the ground and drop a match head on it, it will go off 100% of the time. If you're talking nitroglycerin, you can drop it 10 times and it may go off 6 or 7 times. One thing about all explosives, or a couple of things actually, you can make all of them in your own sink. And if you look on the internet, there's about 600 or 700 different versions. not only do they tell you how to make it, they tell you what to use out of the supermarket and how to end up as a derivative into what you do to that to get it to the raw materials to make your explosive. Anyway, you can make it at home. The secret with any explosive, whether you're making it under the counter or over the counter, whatever, is to make sure you wash it and purify it. Most of the explosive have got some sort of acid, nitric acid, nitrous acid, acetic acid, sulfuric acid. You must get all that out, because if you don't, it sits in there and festers away is probably the best way to put it, and it will eventually either burn or blow up, or both. So you've got to get it as purest form as you can, and in its purest form, they're very stable. TNT, you can put it on the ground and you can pound it with a hammer until your arms fall off, and it'll just look at you and say, well, what's next? Some of the others you don't do that sort of thing, of course, but that's one extreme. But most of them, you lay them out on the ground and set fire to it and it'll just burn away gently. No more questions?
On the trolley there, this curved tube end, what's that used for?
That's your handle to push.
Oh, thought something
No.
really clever.
No. The only clever thing in here is those two doors. They've got the handle on the door is what they call earthed. So when you walk in, and they were doors to where this was done, any static charge that you have built up is taken away. And that's one of the secrets also of staying alive in the explosive industry, is make sure, well, it used to be earthed in the old days, but the equal potential is the big deal these days, so that everything is the same. So no matter what you touch in the room, you're not going to set a spark off, because you're all at the same potential.
These trolleys aren't that. They've got rubber wheels.
That's right, because, no, but also when you start talking about the later propellants, they're not as sensitive as the older ones. But in some respects, they're not as good, because some of the propellants you use now, if it builds up a static charge, it'll build up very quickly and takes weeks before it dissipates it, even though they're coated in graphite. And you look at the black powder, even the manufacturing sheet there, they mix graphite with it again to help dissipate the charge and make it flow freely, so that they don't rub against each other and create a lot of static.
Excuse me, what was kept in those cans down there?
Alcohol. Why else would you work here? They're solvent storage cans, that's all. It depends on where you were, what sort of solvent was in them. They're just solvent storage cans. Very common. Most industries had them in some way or other. But alcohol was used. Alcohol is used in the explosive industry quite a lot. They make about 6,000 to 8,000 litres a week, 100% alcohol at Mulwala Explosives Factory.
Sounds simple. Bring your own flavouring. You're right.
Everything is simple, especially if you don't have to do it.
The minute you know it's simple. Yeah.
All right, well, I've had my say. I can't help you much more.
Thank you very much.
Not a problem.